you've confronted the darkness. You've done the deep, painful work. You've mended the cracks within. Now here you stand, hollow. No fire, no push, no inspiration to move forward. And the most confusing part? There's no clear reason why. You expected relief, maybe even joy, but instead, you sit in this strange, vacant space, wondering if something inside has malfunctioned. What if this isn't a setback at all? What if this empty pause is your soul simply refusing to continue performing the old dance? There's a truth about diving into your shadow no one warns you about. It's something Carl Jung deeply understood, though he rarely said it outright. When you sift through the depths of your hidden mind, when you pull forth all that has long been buried, your unspoken shame, unmet needs, scars from childhood, you don't emerge simply feeling better. You emerge changed, and not just changed, a change so fundamental, so unsettling, that it disrupts your entire sense of being. Jung once wrote that what looks like depression is often just the unraveling of the false self. He saw something that most modern frameworks still overlook. After doing profound internal work, after integrating the parts of you that were once denied, your internal engine doesn't merely adjust, it falls apart. But that collapse isn't a sign of illness. It's a necessary stage of transformation. For years, maybe your entire lifetime, your drive has been powered by unseen forces, the desperate need for acceptance, the fear of abandonment, the insatiable urge to prove you matter, the dread of insignificance. You didn't choose these forces consciously. They operated silently, dictating your choices, compelling you to keep moving, achieving, striving. They were your silent engines. But shadow work doesn't just heal wounds. It reveals the entire mechanism. Suddenly, you can see just how much of your past momentum came from fear masquerading as ambition. You realized that what you thought was the pursuit of joy was often an attempt to outrun pain. So when that machinery grinds to a halt, when those old subconscious scripts no longer govern you, what remains? Not just a lack of motivation. What remains is the disappearance of every reason you once had to be motivated at all. Jung called this dissolution a necessary death before rebirth. Yet no one truly prepares you for how silent and strange this liminal space will feel, the haunting quiet that settles between the self you've outgrown and the self yet to take form. Let me share Sarah's story. That's not her actual name, but what she experienced is very real. After a devastating breakup forced her to confront deep childhood patterns, she committed herself fully to healing. She engaged in EMDR, inner child work, parts therapy, shadow integration. She unearthed it all. And after 2 years, her wounds had healed. The anxiety that had driven her life had dissipated. The need to constantly please others dissolved. The fear of solitude had shifted into a comfortable relationship with herself. But when Sarah tried to return to her corporate marketing career, an odd emptiness met her. Tasks that had once thrilled her now felt flat. Client meetings that used to spark energy now seemed hollow. The promotions she had chased for years now appeared like meaningless illusions. "I used to wake up with this fire inside," she confessed. "Even if it was anxiety-driven, it was fuel. Now I wake up and feel nothing, like I'm waiting for instructions from a voice that won't speak." Jung called this stage the nigredo, the blackening. It's the dark passage where the old form dies, creating space for what is yet to be born. Alchemists understood this. Before any transformation occurs, dissolution must happen. But yet, in our modern world, we're taught that healing should feel good, that progress should be straightforward, measurable, efficient. We expect shadow work to operate like a prescription. Take it, feel better. But shadow work is more like surgery. The operation may be a success, but the recovery is long and strange, defying expectation. During this phase, the things that once mattered may no longer resonate. Career aspirations that seemed essential now feel trivial. Relationships that once gave you butterflies may feel performative. Activities that once brought joy may feel forced. This isn't clinical depression. You aren't hopeless, you aren't incapable. You're simply not motivated by what once motivated you. And without that familiar guidance system, you feel adrift. Jung saw this as a sign that your entire inner framework is being rebuilt. The ego, the small self, has stepped aside. But the deeper self, your authentic essence, has not yet fully emerged to lead. You're in that space between identities, floating in the void between two versions of being. Pause and breathe for a moment. Does this resonate with you? That subtle guilt, that feeling you should be more energized, more driven, more alive, yet somehow aren't? The truth is, your psyche is protecting you from going backward. It refuses to let you reattach to motivations that never belonged to you, but it also hasn't revealed what new forces will carry you forward. You are not lazy. You are not failing. You are standing in sacred pause, preparing for a deeper phase of life. Traditional societies honored this void. Vision quests, rites of passage, dark nights of the soul, all recognized that profound growth demands a season of emptiness. But our culture fears stillness. We pathologize uncertainty. We try to fix what might not need fixing. Jung warned that if we attempt to bypass this stage, if we rush back into activity before transformation completes, we risk rebuilding the same life on the same wounded foundations. The outer life may change, but the inner patterns remain untouched. Here is the truth that redefines everything. The silence is not collapse, it is the breath before becoming. Every old motivation rooted in fear, in performance, in needing to prove your worth, that motivation is gone, not because you're broken, but because you have outgrown it. Your soul is no longer willing to be fueled by survival alone. Jung expressed this perfectly. You are not failing. You are in between. Consider this honestly. How much of your old drive was about earning love? How much was about being enough? How much was sophisticated anxiety dressed as achievement? Shadow work doesn't just patch wounds, it dissolves the lie that your value is conditional on your output. It ends the belief that love must be earned. It frees you from the false idea that worth is something you prove through productivity. And when those illusions die, the motivation they powered vanishes with them. This is what Jung called the death of the persona. The persona is the mask we wear to survive socially, the role we play to secure love, acceptance, belonging. It is not who we truly are. It is who we thought we needed to be. Shadow work strips this mask away. And once you've glimpsed the difference between who you are and who you've performed as, you cannot unsee it. But here lies the challenge. Much of your life was constructed around that false self. Your work, your relationships, your goals, all designed to maintain the performance. When that version of you dies, and your true self has yet to emerge fully, motivation evaporates. You cannot generate true drive from a mask you no longer believe in. Let me tell you about David. A gifted architect, he spent years confronting childhood wounds and attachment patterns. The healing process left him more peaceful than ever before. But when he returned to his work, designing skyscrapers, managing teams, climbing the corporate ladder, he felt disconnected, like an actor playing a part in a play he no longer believed in. I used to be so driven, he told me. 60-hour weeks, 5-year plans, relentless ambition. Now those same goals feel empty. They belong to someone else. David feared he was depressed. He consulted doctors, considered medication, wondered if he needed more therapy, but what he faced was not depression. It was the natural result of authentic change. His old engines, proving himself through achievement, seeking approval, escaping shame, had been dismantled. His psyche had outgrown those drivers, but new motivations had not yet formed. He stood in the same sacred pause you may now find yourself in. This is the critical point Jung described. The moment where we learn that true motivation arises not from compulsion, but from authenticity. When driven by fear, you can force yourself to do almost anything. Fear is potent fuel. It will wake you early, keep you grinding late, push you to perform beyond exhaustion. But fear-based drive cannot sustain forever. You will either burn out or you will heal enough to no longer be afraid. And when fear no longer propels you, if no deeper force has yet arisen, you feel lost. That emptiness is not failure. It is the womb of possibility. It is space being created for something new to take root. If this resonates, keep listening, because the next understanding may feel like a mirror. Jung believed that the deeper self does not shout, it whispers. It does not manufacture urgency, it invites. But if your life is filled with noise, external pressure, internal fear, you cannot hear that whisper. That's why this void matters. That's why the silence is necessary. That's why losing your old drive is not failure. It is sacred preparation. Your soul is arranging the conditions for you to finally hear what it has long tried to tell you. And when new motivation finally arrives, it will not resemble the old. It will not come from lack. It will not carry anxiety. It will not demand or coerce. It will feel quiet. It will feel steady. It will feel certain, like sunlight compared to artificial light. Both illuminate, but only one nourishes. Jung called this the emergence of the self, capital S, not the ego self hungry for validation, not the false self seeking approval, but the self whole, connected to life's larger flow. When the self motivates you, you do not hustle, you respond. You do not chase, you recognize. You do not force passion, you follow curiosity. You do not create to fill emptiness, you create from fullness. And that is where we will continue. Let me share how this unfolded for David, the architect whose world had quietly come undone. After nearly a year adrift in this odd emptiness, doubting himself, questioning his purpose, wondering if therapy had somehow broken something essential, the faintest shift began. It wasn't sudden, dramatic, or life-altering at first, more like dawn rising so gradually that it escapes notice until suddenly the room is filled with light. He began taking long, solitary walks, not to log steps on a fitness app, not to clear his head in some calculated productivity hack, not to tick off a box, but simply to move through the world without expectation. These walks were quiet, no podcasts, no business calls, no purpose but presence itself. On one such walk, David passed an abandoned structure he'd seen countless times before. He had driven past it for years, its crumbling brickwork and silent windows fading into the background of his commute. But that day, something about its weathered dignity, its forgotten beauty, called to him in a way he couldn't ignore. Instead of brushing it off, instead of analyzing the moment or trying to turn it into an immediate project, he allowed himself to be still. He returned to the building again and again, not with a plan, but with open eyes and an open heart. Slowly he began sketching, not blueprints, not diagrams for a client, but impressions. What did this space wish to become? What story did its aging beams and faded walls whisper? This wasn't ambition speaking. It wasn't driven by profit, approval, or prestige. It was driven by a quiet curiosity, by beauty, by resonance. In time, that curiosity led to conversations, first with the building's owner, then with members of the community. Each step arose naturally, unforced, like water finding its path. Before long, a unique restoration project was born, one rooted not in ego, but in honoring the spirit of the place. It became a space where history met possibility, where community could gather in ways no spreadsheet could have predicted. But none of this would have happened if David had forced himself to resurrect his old drive. If he had filled the silence with noise, if he had mistaken the void for a problem to be solved, if he had hurried back into action out of fear, he would have walked past that building for another decade without seeing it. The deeper self, the one beyond ego, does not shout. It hums. It doesn't create panic. It offers invitation. It doesn't press with urgency. It resonates with quiet certainty. When you learn to distinguish this hum from the roar of the old drives, motivation transforms. It no longer comes from needing to conquer your resistance. It comes from sensing a path and choosing to follow. You write because something within longs to speak, not because you need validation. You create because beauty wishes to flow through you, not to impress or outperform. You love because connection is your nature, not because loneliness terrifies you. You work because the work itself calls you, not to prove your value through output. Jung described this as living symbolically, not in fantasy or escapism, but in conscious relationship with life's deeper currents. When you live this way, work becomes devotion, not obligation. Relationships become chosen bonds, not desperate needs. Creativity becomes genuine expression, not performance. Rest becomes nourishment, not guilt. Boundaries become self-respect, not selfishness. And here lies the paradox that would astound your former self. This softer motivation often accomplishes more than all the frantic effort that came before. Why? Because it is sustainable. Because it flows from truth rather than compulsion. Because it honors who you truly are, not who you thought you had to be. It arises from fullness, not emptiness. From love, not fear. From authenticity, not pretense. There is a simple reflection that may help you sense this difference in your own life. Consider this. Take a piece of paper and write down 3 things you believe you should care about right now. Things you think you ought to pursue, feel inspired by, or be working toward. Then ask yourself, where does this should come from? Whose voice is this? Who might be disappointed if you let this go? What fear is underneath this urge? What am I trying to prove through this pursuit? Then, on another page, write down 3 things you feel quietly drawn to. Activities, people, experiences that evoke a gentle curiosity, a sense of peace, a flicker of aliveness. They may not seem logical or practical. That's fine. Ask yourself, what would it feel like to follow this pull without needing to justify it? To trust this draw without fully understanding why? The contrast between these 2 lists may reveal what still comes from old fear and what is beginning to emerge from your deeper truth. One is driven by performance, the other by resonance. Sarah, the woman whose story I shared earlier, discovered through such reflection that her marketing career had been built on fear. Fear of not being enough, fear of disappointing her family, fear of being invisible. But beneath that, she noticed a quiet longing to work with children, a desire that had been buried for years beneath layers of achievement, not because she wanted praise, not to compensate for some inadequacy, simply because something inside her felt alive in the presence of young minds. It took Sarah 2 years to transition from corporate executive to elementary school teacher, 2 years of leaning into curiosity instead of clarity, of trusting the process rather than forcing outcomes, of taking small, authentic steps rather than giant leaps to impress others. Many people doubted her. Friends questioned her sanity. Family worried about her income. Her rational mind offered countless objections. But her soul had begun to sing, and that was a song she could no longer ignore. So understand this. You have not lost your motivation. You have outgrown the forces that once propelled you. This is not a lesser life. It is a richer, truer one. It is your psyche refusing to let you settle for performance when authenticity is now available. The silence that frightens you. It is the space where your true self is preparing to speak. The emptiness you're tempted to fill. It is the ground being cleared for something real to take root. Jung never promised this path would be easy. He never suggested individuation. The process of becoming who you truly are would be smooth or comfortable. He knew it demanded crossing the desert of unknowing, enduring the valley of not feeling, waiting through the darkness of uncertainty. But he also knew this. On the far side of that desert lies an oasis, not the mirage of a perfect life, but the nourishment of a true one. Motivation that arises from this place does not burn you out because it does not come from scarcity. It does not vanish with changing circumstances because it is rooted in your being, not your striving. If you are standing in this void now, wondering why your drive has vanished, consider this. Perhaps nothing is wrong. Perhaps something is profoundly right. Perhaps your soul has grown strong enough to stop performing. Perhaps your psyche is integrated enough to distinguish authentic desire from inherited obligation. Perhaps you are finally healed enough to wait for genuine inspiration rather than manufacturing urgency. Listen to the silence, not with your ears, but with your heart. What has it been trying to tell you? What old patterns has it been protecting you from? What new possibilities is it preparing you to receive? Your old life, the one driven by fear, by hunger for validation, by ceaseless striving, that life is over. You did the work to end it. You faced the darkness so that you would no longer need to run on those old scripts. This is not the conclusion of your healing. It is the threshold of your authentic life. The adventure now begins, not through frantic chasing, but through listening, through trust, through attunement to the hum of your deeper self. This emerging self does not need the old kind of motivation. It needs your presence. It needs your trust. It needs you to stop trying to become someone else and instead pay close attention to who you already are beneath the masks. You are not falling behind. You are not broken. You are exactly where you need to be for the next chapter of your becoming to unfold. And when that quiet pulse of authentic motivation stirs within you, when the path ahead begins to reveal itself in subtle invitations, you will understand why the silence was so essential. You will see why the void needed to be empty, so it could be filled with something real. You will know that the loss of your old drive was not a failure to be fixed, but a gift to be received. The gift of finally being free to live from truth. If any part of this resonated with you, if it gave voice to an experience you've struggled to name, know that you are not alone. Countless others walk this same mysterious passage. And your story, your journey through this liminal space, may be the very beacon another soul needs to navigate their own. So honor the stillness, embrace the space, trust the unfolding. The void is not the end of your story. It is the breath between who you were and who you are becoming. And that new life? It is worth the wait.